On February 6, 2025, a federal jury convicted Los Angeles County Sheriff's Deputy Trevor James Kirk of using excessive force during an arrest. Deputy Kirk, 32 years old, was found guilty of one felony count of deprivation of rights under the color of law, a charge that carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in federal prison. His sentencing is scheduled for April 21st. In this episode, I'm joined by former LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva, Trevor Kirk's attorney Tom Yu, and Nick Wilson of the Resiliency Project. We discuss the details in the case and the shocking verdict that quite literally could end law enforcement's ability to protect citizens from violent criminals.
I think we're all very shocked by the jury's decision, and like I said, we're in America, we respect the verdict, but we always think of, as a lawyer, you're like, wait, what just happened? What just happened? Because the last 3 days, the 2.5 days in trial, I thought, really, I didn't think we were behind. I thought we were making pretty good progress, So when the verdict came out, I said, this is a very dangerous case for everybody else. It begins with, and how it ends is with how this case got started. It got started because, the sitting sheriff presented a case to the federal government to investigate for misconduct. That's very dangerous because they're going to turn that case into a prosecution. And I think if you think about it, a friend of mine, we're talking about this case. Really, I mean, you can indict any use of force. You can indict any shooting, and you're probably going to get convictions of it because the jury, they don't. In this climate, it's very difficult for a jury to understand the work that these men and women are doing, and to put it on camera, it's a very ugly scene. And to me, when I first got the case, I said, okay, this guy's doing his job. He's going to a robbery in progress. There's a suspect that's resisting. He's got to detain the suspect. He's got to conduct an investigation. He's got to make it safe. She's resisting. A takedown, OC spray. That's all there was to it. But then they turn into this. Well, you didn't like how, she was recording. You didn't like how she telling you how to do your job, and this extra narrative starts coming out. And again, that's their theory. But I think for me and our side, we presented the facts of the case. We argued the facts. I did not expect a guilty verdict. There's some cases I go, oh man, I hope I can just hang the case. That would be a win for us. This is not the case that I thought.
One of the things that we learned early on when we were made aware of this case was that LA County Sheriff's Deputy is responding to the Winco market in Lancaster. He is dispatched to a call for service for a 211 now, which for your audience is a robbery in progress occurring now. And a robbery is a felony, right? The theft of something by force or fear. So that already raises the stakes. And that call was never downgraded by dispatch to say it was a lesser crime. So the deputies are going into this situation knowing that it's a felony in progress, right? So they get there, they arrive on scene. They were given a description of both suspects, a male and a female, by the reporting party. When they got there, upon their arrival, the male suspect was detained without incident, even though he was a little bit squirrely. And the female suspect during the detention of the first suspect was standing behind them and videotaping. And it should be noted that the 911 call clearly shows that the reporting party, right, the Winco market, had stated that the suspects had already assaulted loss prevention as they were in the process or the progress of committing their crime. This is what deputies believed going into this situation. Upon their arrival after detaining the first suspect without incident, the Trevor Kirk's partner had signaled, pointed, that's the second suspect. Trevor Kirk goes to try to detain her, and she becomes immediately combative, resisting arrest. One of the first things out of her mouth was something to the effect of, "You can't touch me," backs up. He immediately does what every reasonable police officer would do before investigating a violent crime or a robbery. You have to make the scene safe. And he gives her commands to stop. He tries to grab her hands and put her into a control hold to detain her. She continues to resist arrest, at which point he did what every single police officer is trained to do. He took her to the ground to be able to apply control techniques on her. She continues to be combative. She continues to yell, scream, bring up her hand, bring up her leg. At which point he could have used a higher level of force, but he resorted to the most basic minimal use of force, which is pepper spray, and warned her that he was going to do it. Pepper sprays her 2 times, and then he takes her into custody right after that because the second dose of pepper spray was effective. And the second that he actually was able to place her in handcuffs because the pepper spray was effective, what happened was he calls for medics. He says 902R right on the radio, which means roll medics so that they can come and attend to the pepper spray dispersion that he did, all within policy. As they're responding to the 211 now, the robbery in progress, they were able to detain the first suspect without incident. Okay, even though he was a little bit squirrely. And it should be noted that both deputies going into this had identified both suspects based on the suspect description given by employees at the Winco market, right? So they went into it knowing full well that both of the people that they were detaining were robbery suspects. They were nothing short of that. They were nothing less of that than that. They were robbery suspects.
Can I ask a quick question? So did the woman assault the security officer, or was it the male that assaulted the
A woman.
That's what I thought. Okay, so keep going. Sorry about that, Nick.
Yeah, so the second female, and I'm just telling you from everything I've seen and understood in the totality of this case, as the evidence was presented, it was really shocking. Deputy Trevor Kirk goes to detain the second female after his partner had pointed out, hey, basically the person behind you is the second suspect, the female. And he uses reasonable, minimal force to try to effect an arrest, and used a takedown technique and pepper spray to overcome the active resistance from the violent robbery suspect, right? This is what's in their frame of mind. And when I'm talking about this, people have to understand what their training is. Their training, their experience. They're in an uncontrolled parking lot. There are innocent bystanders around, and the police officer's primary objective is to control the scene by using reasonable force to do that. And so after he was able to apply his second disbursement of pepper spray and take her into custody, he immediately calls for medics. And so he says on the radio right then and there, 902R, which kind of disproves the prosecution's allegation that this is a willful what is it? Willful, now I'm drawing a blank. Willful deprivation of civil rights. Because anyone that would willfully deprive someone of their civil rights certainly would not have called for that. They certainly would not have taken measures to try to help the suspect. And here we are with a situation that's politically charged, and there's not an officer that I know, not an officer that is trained in the state of California that would have done something different. They can Monday morning quarterback all day long what happened, but at the end of the day, this was not deprivation of civil rights. And I'll just kind of stop there. But as an overview, that's kind of what occurred.
Alex, what do you think about how this jury could have come to that conclusion given all of this information?
Well, I think they were from the very beginning. The video kept being played over and over and over again. The same video. I mean, ad nauseum. I don't think they thought much deeper into it, and unfortunately, that's what went down. But I think it's worth noting, though, how the prosecution used or manipulated the information by creating calling pepper spray a dangerous weapon and claiming that well, imagine the few seconds that from when the use of force started, that they formed the opinion that he willfully, deprived them of their civil rights. How could someone do such an event in such a short period of time? And they gave no weight to the fact that detaining one robbery suspect and attempting to detain another robbery suspect, they were the only two deputies around.
Did they
There
not
was no one else.
look at the evidence? I mean, how do you not look at the entire picture and see that these people were in the middle of committing a crime, that the store themselves are the ones that called the deputies to come to, to deal with this? And how do you turn this person into a victim? I just don't understand it. I can't even imagine anybody with common sense coming to this conclusion. Regardless of watching that video over and over and over again, if you understand the facts like you are supposed to when you're on a jury, you should know that this person is being detained because they were committing an unlawful act. Am I wrong in understanding that? Or
No,
Tommy?
Well, I mean, it's funny, right? As a lawyer, you think people are supposed to pay attention to you when you're talking. The closing argument was, to me, you know, the way that the prosecutor argued the case, I thought, okay, man, this guy is he's throwing like everything there is to it. He's going really fast, right? He was talking really fast. He was like, it's more of like, let me finish. So I said, I'm going to make my point. I'm going to attack certain pieces of evidence and I'm going to compare and contrast what happened to what they're painting that happened. That was kind of like my big picture, right? Is to kind of focus on first, it's not excessive force. If it was excessive force, you don't have a specific intent to deprive using excessive force, right? So there's two parts of it. And it's got to be, and I told him it's got to be married together at the same time. And the first part was, okay, let me get them through the excessive force. That this is how they're trained. And the first thing I told him was, you don't have to like this. You don't have to think it's morally correct or like it. This is criminal court. We're in federal court. It's a criminal case. You have to determine if they met the burden. They didn't care. I mean, in a different jury, maybe in a different panel, maybe, but that jury gave no shit about it. I mean, well, you guys were there in the closing argument. I don't know if you saw something.
yeah, no, and I'm going to speak and, it's not Tommy or Sheriff Villanueva putting this in my mouth. It's based on my own observations. And I've been in a lot of different trials in my own career. But Tommy did a phenomenal job and he articulated things so that the basic person could understand the elements of the crime, that the prosecution did not meet the burden. And it's worth noting that even if someone believes that they are being illegally detained, it does not allow them to become combative. And the law is very clear on that. You cannot resist arrest even if you think you're being falsely detained. You had so much overwhelming evidence in this case that showed that Deputy Trevor Kirk attempted to use reasonable force to effect an arrest in the midst of his investigation with a suspect that decided that they were going to be combative. And this never would have happened if that suspect, not victim, complied with lawful commands and just went with the program like the first suspect did. But that's not the way it turned out. And I think that, this was a very young and I don't want to get into it or attack my own, the beliefs from what I saw, but the DOJ and the FBI right now, they had a job to do. Okay. Unfortunately, I think that the real miscarriage of justice is the misapplication of the law and the continuation of the prosecution of Deputy Trevor Kirk, because any law enforcement practitioner, you don't have to be an attorney to see it. You could be a basic recruit just out of the academy. They would look at this case and say, good job. All right. Sadly, justice didn't prevail in this case, and Deputy Trevor Kirk in no way deprived someone of their civil liberties.
I'll give it another take too, because I remember during the trial, the prosecution gave a lot of weight to look at all the commands they gave to the male deputy. Oh my God, all this de-escalation the Deputy Alejandro did, how wonderful. And yet nothing happened the other side. But what they didn't consider was, from a physical threat perspective, he remained the biggest physical threat until he was properly handcuffed. And even then, it was iffy. He wasn't very compliant. And so once the handcuffs were secured, then the attention turned to her. And she was non-compliant from the very beginning. Judging by her, I'm going to use my cell phone to record you. I'm not a suspect anymore magically because I'm an innocent bystander with my cell phone, which was the furthest from the truth. And that irritated me, hearing how they were trying to spin that story.
One of the things that I saw when I was there was that the prosecution attempted to allege that it was Trevor Kirk's, for lack of a better term, his anger, his frustration that he was being filmed. And that's why he went straight for the cell phone, which actually is an absolute fabrication of the truth, because law enforcement officers are trained to go for the hands, right? Because hands are what kill. And so what he was trying to do was he was trying to detain her by grabbing her hands and put her hands behind her back. That's one fact. Another interesting things is that they painted Trevor Kirk in a way that seemed politically charged. They vilified this man, and they basically, going with what Sheriff Villanueva said, the first subject wasn't doing what the second suspect was doing when Trevor Kirk was confronting her. And that was clear as day. He was talking a lot and a little bit squirrely, but he didn't do this, taking a swipe at Trevor Kirk in the beginning, backing up, saying, no, you can't touch me, and actively resist arrest. That's what she was doing. So people have to start understanding that the real totality of this, the message that this really sends to law enforcement. Basically, the outcome of this case is you're telling police officers that when they go to a robbery call and they use reasonable and minimal force to try to overcome resistance, that they now can be subjected to the federal government in a crime which I believe was a malicious, politically motivated crime. This, elements of a crime. The elements of the crime were not there. Tommy Yu, in his opening, in his closing, in his cross-examination, did a phenomenal job of substantiating that. And it's worth noting that the quote victim of this crime, the one that Trevor Kirk detained and arrested, which was really the suspect, never showed up in court to tell her story. The prosecution put on a case based on hours and hours of the same video and body-worn camera surveillance stuff.
Effectively brainwashing.
In fact, in Tommy, you can verify this. That whole allegation that he went to grab the phone, like there was some conspiracy to conceal the recording. He was recording it himself. Right. What is there to hide? In fact, his partner's recording it as well.
And what I see, as I wrote in my article, it started, aside from the deputy gang nonsense, station tattoo nonsense, which obviously, as of now, I think has gone nowhere because didn't a panel of judges kind of shut that down? Or wrong?
That's the latest I understand.
So let's go to the first incident that kind of started to lead to where we got to Trevor Kirk's case. And that to me was the Antelope Valley activists that were hemming and hawing for the sheriff's department to be in compliance when, from what I understand, they were in compliance, 93% from what I understand. So from there, it kind of snowballed into this big deal. Lackervane was taken out of his spot as captain. And then right after that was Winco a few weeks later, correct? So these activists started this tension.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Luna, how this started and what's really going on, how it transcended into Trevor Kirk. Okay. I can speak to this because I was very intimately aware of what was going on with Luna's campaign. So this is what happened. This started because members of the public were reporting to the LA County Sheriff's Department allegations of public corruption, and Sheriff Villanueva's public corruption unit under Sheriff Tim Murakami and his team started investigating public corruption that involved the Board of Supervisors and other people in the LA County political realm, including the OIG and other people. So having said that, in my opinion, and based on everything I have seen, what did they do? They were, and by the way, this involves members of the media and people that were tipping them off on public corruption investigations.
I was involved in this. I know. I was
Who
well
were
aware.
involved in this. They became absolutely petrified that they would be implicated should those investigations come to fruition. Mind you, before we continue, Sheriff Villanueva, his department, in the with full transparency, publicly put out letters and memos to and from LASD, to the OIG, to the Attorney General, to the FBI, to members of the County Board of Supervisors on lasd.org to show the public what was going on. Okay, what happened was that the Board of Supervisors recruited Luna to run against Sheriff Villanueva because Luna would be the kind of guy that would fall in line and toe the line for the Board of Supervisors, right? Because he's bought and paid for. Having said that, they waged lawfare against Sheriff Alex Villanueva. And in the process of waging lawfare against Sheriff Villanueva and working with members of the media to frame this narrative of deputy gangs, Luna starts to campaign on a myriad of things regarding deputy gangs, regarding the tons of things. I confronted him in his campaign. The thin blue line is racist. We need to hold deputies accountable. The sheriff's department's out of control, yada, yada, yada. In the total of all these acts, there were never, ever, no evidence of deputy gangs, despite the OIG and the County Board of Supervisors' crazy attempts to try to prove and justify that.
I'll tell you what, Nick, on that note, if you go through all the rhetoric in the last 4 years when I was in office, and you ask yourself, does any of this have anything to do with public safety? And you realize, oh my God, it had nothing. It was all about politicians' feelings, perceptions of being under the microscope, being held accountable. But when it came to actual public safety, like getting people to deputies to solve crimes, respond to emergencies, evacuate people, during times of crisis, that stuff had nothing to do with any of that. It all became very painfully obvious. Fast forward now with the fires that happened this year.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this narrative continued. And I even cornered Luna at one of his campaign rallies. And I'm like, hey, like I'd be the first one to call out if there's corruption or if there's systemic racism, as he continued saying, in law enforcement. But those are the things that he continued to campaign on and echoed in every campaign event to appease a certain subculture of society, to frame this narrative that Sheriff Villanueva was the boogeyman and that there were all these things. Now, fast forward, what's happened? They found no evidence of deputy gangs. He's now admitted that in a press conference while in police uniform and after being asked by members of the media. And they used this incident with Trevor Kirk they made him a sacrificial lamb to fulfill a campaign promise against Sheriff Villanueva. This is a level of corruption that is so broad and big, and they fanged an innocent man who's an army veteran with two small children in order to try to save face to the board of supervisors and basically show the public, hey, look, we got a bad guy. Well, they didn't, because the law is on our side, and even though we didn't get the verdict that we wanted, and I know that Tommy Yu is working hard with his team on appeals. This was the biggest miscarriage of justice I've ever seen. And I think that most people agree. And right now, the sheriff's department, I'm talking about the line level deputies who understand this very clearly, are up in arms and outraged because the implications of what has just happened not only impacts Trevor Kirk, but it impacts every single one of them and law enforcement officers across this entire state.
So Trevor wasn't the first to be targeted. He's one of many. He's the one who suffered the most. There's no question about that. But it's pretty evident by other cases that this was Luna's sole focus, was to take down these deputies and submit their cases to, if he didn't believe, as in Trevor's case, Gascon didn't pursue it. So he went straight to the feds. Am I wrong?
In fact, Tommy, this thing had been completed internally. It went through a critical incident review and EFRC before the feds ran with it.
Yeah, it went through all that. They took your playbook of going to the feds, but for the wrong guy.
For the wrong reasons. We use that playbook very sparingly, and we use it for the right times.
Because
when it was called for, I want to say, well, in the Fernando Arroyo murder, we took it out of Gascon's hands, gave it to the feds because we know we did not get justice under Gascon. A prime example. The same thing with Andres Guardado case, that the OIG interfered with it and bungled that investigation. But we found a previous use of force case that we were allowed to go to the feds in with, and they took care of that when they succeeded in getting a plea. I think it was a plea deal with the two deputies involved. But they knew there were ones that they had no business being deputies. That is the appropriate time to use federal or state intervention in cases like this. But in this category 1 use of force, I don't think in your entire history, Tommy, as either a defense attorney or as a member of the department, have you ever heard of the feds involved in a category 1 use of force?
Never.
Category lowest level use of force, and your audience has to understand and ask themselves a very serious question. Since the 80s, law enforcement has been trying to bridge the gap, as they say, between law enforcement and the community in an effort to improve community relations under the philosophy of community-oriented policing and problem solving. It started at San Diego PD, it went to LA County, and then through the rest of the country. And transparency is a huge factor in that. Why in the world if Sheriff Villanueva's administration was putting out transparent documents, memorandums, and letters between LASD and outside organizations regarding matters of public corruption, would Luna on his first day literally remove all of those documents that showed the public corruption investigations from the LASD.org website and then dismantle the public corruption unit?
Mm-hmm.
We do know that he had laser focus on taking Alex down when he got in, just to further the agenda of the Board of Supervisors while Alex was in office. I guess my biggest concern right now, aside from Trevor and his family and all the deputies, is that people need to understand how this severely impacts their personal safety. And that's what people who are not law enforcement that are going to watch this need to understand, is that a verdict like this just sends a message to law enforcement: don't bother doing your job. Don't bother arresting a suspect. Don't even bother touching a suspect, because you're the one who's going to become a suspect. So what does that do? So many people are displaced, and they are feeling like they are not being protected by the politicians, especially after these wildfires and the Eaton fire that was so horribly handled by Sheriff Luna. And so now they get to go to another level. No water, no resources to fight fires. Now the last nail in the coffin to law enforcement, which was convicting an officer for doing his job. And that's what people need to understand. These guys don't want to do their job. They're gonna retire. They're gonna lateral. But even if they lateral, they're gonna have to lateral to an agency that is not gonna have the same philosophy and want to pursue a federal case against them because somebody is claiming that their civil rights were violated. That's the problem here that people need to understand, that are not law enforcement, because law enforcement is becoming extinct really fast with judgments like this.
If I were an LA County Sheriff's deputy right now, and I watched my current sheriff under Luna create so many debacles that impacted hiring, recruitment, retention, that it created a workforce nightmare where now I and my partners are being forced to work overtime. Our days off, our requests for days off are being canceled. We're working double, triple shifts. We're exhausted. We have time away from our family. You take that a step further. If I saw my partner, Trevor Kirk, be maliciously prosecuted because a sheriff decided that he was going to walk that case across the street to the Department of Justice because even Gascon wouldn't take the case, and I knew that using all of my tools that I've been trained to employ in terms of overcoming a robbery suspect, here's what I'm going to do to answer your question so that the public understands. I'm going to park my patrol car. I'm never going to be proactive, right? I'm not going to go out and look for people that are in the act of committing crimes. I am going to zero proactivity. Okay. I'm just going to sit there like firemen, and I'm going to respond to calls for service. And that's never going to decrease the crime rate, which means in turn that the residents of LA County are no longer safe.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if you thought that the hiring, retention, recruitment issue was already in crisis, this just sealed the deal.
Well,
nobody is going to want to work there.
Not to be a doomsday person, but the matter is slightly worse than that, because the legacy media, in collusion with the Board of Supervisors and the political establishment in LA, this both city and county, they're not counting anymore the objective measures of police activity. Remember, in fact, remember the old Tommy U response times? How important it is to have low response times? They don't even count response times anymore because it's really ugly. Arrests. Have you ever heard numbers about arrests? How about self-initiated patrol activity, citations, all these things that are statistical data that are generated, that are easy to compare year to year across the entire department, across all of law enforcement. They just don't even count those anymore. Just kind of like crime, where they've stopped counting crime rates and they're telling, oh, crime is down, where everybody's saying, are you crazy? It looks like anarchy out there. And they'll tell you that crime is down. They're not counting the stuff that matters because the message is the information is so bad and damning. They figure, well, if we don't count it, the press doesn't report on it, we're off the hook and we won't be held accountable. That is the big game that's being played right now. And that's how the Board of Supervisors relied on endorsements from the LA Times to all three of them that were up for re-election in 2024 to get reelected. Even though the county is a raging dumpster fire in every which way possible that you measure it, it never reaches the foot of the elected leaders that are creating this whole mess. And that is the big challenge. So, Lord willing, with the new Trump administration and new federal DOJ, we can start kind of pushing this pendulum back towards the middle, where we need to start holding people accountable. We need to start actually having data, the real picture, disseminated public, where people can appreciate, hey, yeah, you defund law enforcement, no one's going to rescue your grandma from that senior home in Altadena. She's going to burn to death. Why? Because there was no deputy left to rescue her. Mm-hmm. So while you voted for that, enjoy the rewards of your political ideology.
Tommy, can you give us kind of some insight on what's going to happen next with Trevor?
Yeah. So we're working on a motion to vacate the verdict. In the federal criminal system, the judge can vacate the verdict if we meet the high burden. And that's very rarely granted. I think if there is a case to be granted, this is the case. Now, I told the jury, obviously, they didn't agree with me or they didn't pay attention to that portion, but you need to have the mindset to know it's excessive force, and you got to cross the line of knowing it's excessive force the moment you approach the suspect. That is impossible. Like, there is no evidence of that in this case. So let's say there was excessive force, right? Because let's say you go, well, I don't agree how it was slammed. The prosecutors said it was WWF style slam. And I threw it right back at them. Do you see a WWF style, or do you see how that's third trained? But if we can get the judge to focus on the intent, because that is the weakest part of their case, the United States government's case, is that they did not show that Trevor, let's say he said it's excessive force. Let's just say that. We don't agree, but let's say the judge says it's excessive. There is no evidence to support that Trevor knew the moment he approached that suspect, he intended to use that excessive force. And that is the standard in this prosecution that the prosecutors have to meet. And they didn't meet that standard. Not even close. I mean, there are various other things that were not there that I think, it's the jury. They get to decide on these things, right? That's why we have a jury. But they did not, like what Nick said, we pointed out, like, if you wanted her to suffer, if you want to retaliate, if you want to teach her a lesson, then why would you call the ambulance? She hasn't even gotten up yet. That is incomprehensible.
One of the things too, and I'm just for your viewers to understand, when they're trying to prove willful deprivation of civil rights, one of the things that they said was, they put her in the back after being pepper sprayed. They put her in the back of a police vehicle and it has plastic seats. Well, that's an air conditioned unit. He put her seated on a hot pavement in the 90-degree heat that they continued to allege on how hot it was, that would have been worse for her. It would have been worse if they didn't continue opening the door to give her the air that she needed to help her try to breathe more. Every single argument that the prosecution was trying to push it actually worked in our favor, except that the jury didn't see it that way, right? So Trevor Kirk, he did everything right, even though I don't want to even attack their their use of force expert, but that it will come out later. I just want to say there's
What you sports expert?
yeah,
One was a deputy when I was 2 years old.
yeah. So, Tommy brought up a really good point during the case when the use of force expert said Trevor Kirk did everything wrong that day, except for driving to get there. Well, you
Wow,
know, Tommy, Tommy,
I'm sorry, wait a second. That sounds so extremely biased. Like that's not even professional to say that.
but it's not. It's actually irresponsible. But Tommy came back
Yes.
with a great argument, which is the truth, which is that you mean to say that calling for an ambulance right after uh, getting her into custody, was that not the right thing to do? Was it not the right thing to do to give continued commands for her to stop? Any reasonable person, after being just having a law enforcement officer give their presence there and put their hands on, they would just stop. Okay. Normal people who are not committing a crime or had just committed a crime don't fight the police. You just stop. You just command. You just go with the program. Having said all that, uh, this is I think the one case, at least for me, and I know for others, and I know Tommy. Everyone had a vested interest, a personal vested interest in this because they knew the merits of the case, and everyone is impacted by this, and they should be, and so are the deputies. The deputies, I've received myself alone. I'm not even speaking on behalf of Sheriff Villanueva or Tommy. I've received hundreds of messages over the last couple days. Deputies are outraged. They're heartbroken. They don't want to do their jobs. They're afraid to do their jobs, and they're looking now to whether it's lateral out or quit or do what they can within their sphere of influence to try to, um, make this right because this is so wrong. And I think uh, throughout all of history, we've always called out when law enforcement's on the wrong side of it. Um, Sheriff Villanueva's done that. I've done that. Um, Tommy's done that. Uh, this is not that case. This is an innocent man that the entire world just saw be convicted of a crime he didn't do. And that's because of one person in concert with others working, at, on their behalf. But that's because of Robert Luna. Robert Luna betrayed his oath that he swore. He betrayed the badge. He betrayed everything in law enforcement um, that he's supposed to resemble as a driving force for good.
Do any of you think that there is like a great possibility that Trevor did not get a fair trial? Because how does this jury not know all the things that have been in the press about
Well,
the sheriff's department and legacy media just totally misrepresenting almost every single case that comes out of the department?
this I don't know about the media side, but I can, Alex and Nick were there. That judge gave me every opportunity to do my job.
He did.
The times where I thought he was going to ream my ass, let me go. Even the times where I had,
The jury itself.
well, we don't control the jury, but I can tell you that in federal court, judges don't care. They will reprimand you in front of a jury. And I got to tell you, I've never seen a lawyer on their side, but just the lawyers in general get reprimanded the way they have. That judge, from what I can see, he allowed us to do our jobs. There was no, even in closing argument, he was cutting them off. He was cutting off the prosecutor's argument. I mean, as far as the judge giving us the opportunity to, from our side and my job, zero complaint. I think these two gentlemen will attest to that. Zero.
I've never seen it ever in trial before where a judge came in so strong. And there were times where Tommy didn't even have to object. The judge just said, "What are you doing? Get on with your case. Put on your case." I was in shock, and I think that's why in the very beginning of this interview, Tommy had said that we kind of got into this towards the end, very comfortable. Even we were, anxious, but comfortable because Tommy put on a great case, and we all felt like the judge saw exactly what was going on. He understood what was happening, and
The jury made the decision, correct?
Yeah, I mean, look,
That's why I'm concerned is what I'm saying. Like, the judge did his job. He did everything right, which is great. But it's the jury. What were they subjected to?
Let me tell you this, CC. Here's the elephant in the room that I was gonna address in opening, but it was very close to lunchtime. The judge gave me this look like, get to the fucking point and move on. So I didn't address this because you got to read the room when you walk into court, right? It's 11:37, and I got 20 minutes before he's gonna look at the clock. But here's the elephant in the room that I addressed in my closing: is there's a race component that people don't talk about. For me, it's easier because I'm not white or not black. I can kind of blend in a little bit, right? But there is a race component that people don't understand or they don't talk about. Is he's white with a mustache, she's black with gray hair,
And a woman.
That shouldn't matter. It shouldn't. But I think we can all agree, if that lady was white or Asian or maybe even Hispanic, I don't think we'll be here.
Yeah, reverse the roles and 100%, Tommy.
100%.
If that was a female, a younger female black deputy, we wouldn't be here. And that is the we talked about this, CC, in months earlier in the summer. This is something that people don't talk about. It is the race component that people don't understand. They see a white cop taking down a black suspect. And by the way, the Department of Justice, they never called her a suspect, right? And I had to get it out of their experts. I said, let's stop calling her a victim or a subject. She's a fucking suspect, right? And this is the narrative, is that they're using this. Okay, well, she's black. Oh, it's a Lancaster. He's white. He must be racist. I mean, I think there's an undertone to it. And that's what's unsaid. Now, this case was never about race, right? The Graham standards and the policies, but it's a factor. People think about it. You look at it, you're like, oh shit, white cop, black suspect.
And Tommy's 100% accurate. And the truth is the prosecution, especially in their closing, said all she had was a mask, her glasses, and an inhaler. And this big bad wolf essentially came in and, they demonized it from the beginning to the end while playing the video on repeat, which didn't prove anything other than she was resisting arrest. And in Graham versus Connor or any other subsequent case law or policies and procedures at LASD or the standards and training that they receive at post, he was well within his right to defend himself, overcome resistance, effect an arrest of a robbery suspect. That's the case at hand. That's what we're talking about.
The suspect assaulted Trevor Kirk. So I don't understand. Like, in any case, if somebody hits somebody first, that person is obviously the one who should be in trouble, not the one who's protecting himself, correct?
You would think that, yes.
But the thing with CC with jury trials, man, people always say that there's a runaway jury. Like, we could do our job, they could do their jobs. You leave it all there, and at the end, you just never fucking know, man. You really don't. I mean, there's cases that I tried where I'm like, fuck, I hope they don't convict him. I pray a hang is a win. I had a case where a case hung 11-1, you know, and I thought there is no way they're gonna hang. This is so damn clear. In fact, after the closing, I thought those lawyers looked pretty concerned. You know, I thought their faces were very concerned.
Oh, they were, and I know there were times that Tommy was working with this his defense team, and I think, you know, Sheriff Villanueva and I and others that were there in support of Trevor Kirk were looking very carefully at the prosecutors, and they looked like they were in sustained fear, like we were in trouble. You could see it; it was palpable. But they went so far as to continue in their closing. This was a dangerous weapon, and they basically vilified Trevor Kirk by saying that he was agitated and angry as retaliation, on top of attempting to remand him into custody. And then after that, with the grieving family and people there that stood on the side of the law, right? They were high-fiving each other. They were celebrating in the courtroom. And that was unbelievable to me. That to me is not professional standard or conduct in our system of jurisprudence. Justice, you know, is supposed to be blind. But Tommy's right about everything he said about the race factor being an actual factor in this. And it was politically motivated and driven 100% because of Luna.
Tommy, did you get a chance when you had the FBI agent on the stand? I know she got her 4 years and she was an English teacher. Did you ask her how many arrests she had made?
You know what? I decided not to cross-examine her because a couple of reasons. Again, reading the room, reading the judge, he was done with her, man. And I thought strategically, because I didn't. This is, you know, first witness, first thing. They played 3 hours of videos. They marked 100 exhibits, thousands of pages of policy. So far back to his custody days, I said, you know what? I'm gonna argue that point because she says she stands in the office and she looks at tapes. Now, here's the thing, and I didn't see what the prosecutors did after. And here's kind of my own personal take on them. And that's what I told the jury, that this isn't about us, LASD versus the FBI or LASD versus DOJ lawyers. I said, look, and I really mean it. Those agents and those lawyers, I'm sure they were taking orders. They're doing a job, okay? They were not unethical to me. The agents were very accommodating, even in the earlier process. So I had nothing bad to say about anybody in this process. I really don't, deep down my heart. But they're not deputy sheriffs. They don't respond to robberies. They don't wear Sam Browns. They don't wear shoulder patches and badge and drive a radio car and respond. They're different people. And I really meant it when I said it. I didn't, like, it wasn't like some pretend stuff. It's like, look, we need people in the FBI. They do a job that we don't do. But they're not us. They're not Tanner Green. They're not in the dark blue uniform. They're different people, you know? Mm-hmm. And so you know, we need English teachers, but English teachers don't respond to robbery calls. FBI agents don't respond to robbery calls. And you know, I had no problems with any of the agents, really. Like, they were actually very professional. I really had zero issues. I really mean it. Like, they didn't, well, you know, there's some people, cops, they walk the line, right? We all know them. We've all met them. They're a little bit overzealous. There's prosecutors that are overzealous. Honestly, I have no issues with any of those guys and gals.
For me, I agree with you on your assessment that they were doing their job.
Yeah.
I think it's just from a generational perspective and their profound lack of experience. I don't think they comprehend, because they have never done the job, they don't comprehend the ripple effect of this prosecution on the entire operation of local municipal law enforcement. I don't think they can even comprehend that. And that's what my concern is. But that's a higher level concern they're putting on there.
You know, when I was working with the FBI task force as a task force officer, we had agents do ride-alongs with us on Saturday night. We would have like a week where we're down kind of stats, and we'll be like, hey, let's go 10-8 and let's go arrest the bad guys. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, we get in the car, wear a fucking vest. And one of the agents, who actually is a very good friend of mine, he came in dress shoes and a dress shirt. And I say, bro, what are you we're gonna hit the streets. You gotta go back and change your tennis shoes. Their brains are not wired that way. So we didn't ride along. We got to pursue, guy dumped the gun, whatever. And they're like, holy shit, this is like real police work. I'm like, yeah, bro, come sit in the office and click fucking.
Welcome to the jungle.
Well, I say that to say this: these agents, they're wired differently, right? They're not street police. They will never be, and will never be FBI agents. We as in law enforcement, like I can never do that job. And so when you take an FBI agent to dissect a street cop's use of force, they're gonna do it to what they know. Just like when we're talking, we're gonna do to what we know. And in this case, unfortunately, I tell Trevor, I told his family, I told all you guys, like, I'm gonna give it 1,000%. And I'm gonna, if we didn't put on some evidence, it's not because we're not prepared. It was a tactical decision at that time, without the benefits hindsight 2020, right? That we're not gonna do something. But it's interesting because I got an email from ALAD's their message blast. It's essentially that says, well, we could have won the case. Really? and I think it's such an insulting correspondence, and it's an insulting message, I think, to everybody involved, where it's specifically to these deputies that drove down from Lancaster. I got to give it up to those guys and gals. These guys and these gals drove every day from Lancaster to downtown LA. You don't see that, man. You really don't. They're a very special group of people up there. But for ELAT to send that correspondence out, I thought it was very insensitive. They didn't offer any help. They did nothing to help Trevor, which they have the right to be because he's a LASPA member. But I tell people they may have convicted him, but they're not going to convict my conviction and my commitment to the case.
No. Tommy, you did a great job in this case, and I know that it must be tough on you too, having tried it and the outcome. But the truth is that, going back earlier to what you guys were talking about regarding FBI and not blaming them, and I agree with Sheriff Villanueva. They're taking orders, and they're there's orders there that they're taking. But at the end of the day, whether you're local, state, or a federal sworn law enforcement officer, or you're a prosecutor, you all take the same oath. And you could tell when Tommy was put on the case that both the FBI agent, the case agent that had been on for 5 minutes, and the who was an English teacher, and other people, the reason that they looked so concerned was because Tommy was making the right points in the right case. And you could almost see their wheels spinning. And when I say everyone takes the same oath, like, you can't, me or Tommy and the sheriff can't be in a 3-man unit and decide that we're just going to arrest someone arbitrarily or capriciously without probable cause, because then we'd end up in prison. You can't do that. It's a violation of your oath. I think the same is true of this prosecution. You got to ask yourself why an FBI agent, the case agent of 4 years, that only testified to what she reviewed, who was an English teacher, was somehow the case agent on this case, and has clearly not been in a similar use of force incident, and is now assigned to the Civil Rights Division of the FBI. And then on top of that, have half the courtroom packed with FBI agents and AUSAs, assistant U.S. attorneys. The whole thing was just strange. But at the end of the day, the judge was certainly reasonable. Something went wrong. It wasn't Tommy. It wasn't the merits of the case. But I definitely I have issue with the way that the case was presented by the U.S. Attorney's Office, only in that it was political and it was clearly spearheaded by Luna.
Well, that's my biggest concern. Like I said, I have an issue with, uh, if you guys are clearly thinking that this case went like swimmingly on your side, you could see they're sweating bullets. How in the hell did this jury come up with this verdict? And I'm telling you, my gut, my woman's intuition, my intuition just as a journalist, knowing what's going on, I do believe that pool was potentially was tainted. I honestly believe that. In my heart of hearts, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Tommy, you know that. I go on straight facts, but I'm telling you, my gut is telling me that if that judge was spot on, your case was great. Those guys looked really nervous, and that jury well voted the way they did. They were tainted somehow.
You know, CC, sometimes when I ask others, like, hey, what did you think about this cross examination, or what do you think about this? I ask people that because when you're like on the stage, so to speak, and you're on the stage in federal court, believe me, you get into a not a tunnel vision, but you get laser focus in that examination. So I'm not really I'm paying attention, but I'm not paying attention. I'm looking at him, but I'm not really processing what's going on because I got to focus on the questions. And I've asked a lot of people, like, hey, man, what did you think of this? I've asked some people that are not lawyers, the people from my office, people from just, sit in the audience. And what, like after day one, what did you think of the cross-examination of the use of force act? Oh, fuck. I mean, it was not like, well, I don't know. I mean, it was overwhelming, like, damn, I think things are going our way. And I'm not being naive. There are times I've tried cases where, fuck, we took some hits today. Or like, damn, this guy sucked, nothing like that. In this case, I mean, even after day one, I called Nick. I'm like, how did you go? Oh, fuck, I saw this. Nothing. What we thought was, and I understand we come from law enforcement background, but we're reasonable. I think we're reasonable human beings, and we can see something for what it is. And that I did not expect. Not in like an hour verdict or 45 minutes because they went to lunch.
An hour.
And I don't know if they're deliberating over lunch, but they got lunch served at like 12:45, and around 1:40-ish, we got a question, which means that question is presupposing that they have rendered the guilty verdict for the excessive force already. So, I mean, if you talk about deliberating under the law, there is no way you can agree. I mean, because that is a specific intent crime. You have to specifically know you're crossing the line at the moment you cross the line. It can't be after. It has to be that moment. How do you get that in less than an hour? That is the part for me for the rest of my life. I would not know.
That's why.
Just so you know, I did call Tommy and say, is something not right? Because I get a weird feeling right here. And it is weird how jury selection went. And I was just saying, it was like, I think it was like 6 or 7 people asked to be excused because they have a bias against law enforcement because of, their perception of police brutality, this, that, and the other. And it was a little strange for me at one point, just throwing it out there.
Well,
that's my point. So my intuition is right. I mean, it was just something like that.
It was everyone else that remained on the jury heard all of that. I'm not saying that is why the outcome was. I'm just saying, I also think it was strange that one of the members that was pooled to be on the jury for consideration before he requested to be excused went to law school with one of the prosecutors actually putting on the case.
Look, here's how I think. Okay, in federal court, the judge picks the jury. They do the jury selection questionnaire. It is like every federal judge does it differently. This judge does it this way for the past 30 years. He voir dires them in this very, very quick questioning. That is how he impanels the jury. Usually it's about 35 minutes to pick a jury with a federal judge. In state court, you can get a week. You can get a week. You can get 3 days. I had a case right before the month of COVID. I had 4 days because it was a cop case. It was a pretty lengthy, very complex issue. Judge gave me 4 days. This judge doesn't. That is the way it goes. Now, I don't know about the coincidence or not coincidence. Look, here's what I know. In the next 10 days, I'm going to spend a tremendous amount of time with my team to work on a post-verdict motion. It's going to be heard April 21st. There's a lot of fight left on this case.
Good. Glad to hear it.
The fight is not over. Okay. We're all in on the trial. That door closed. For whatever reason, it's not there. I am still processing that because at some point in my day, I always thought, what if? Don't what if talk. But what if you did this? What if you did that? I have to condition myself not to what if it, because if you do your own autopsy, it's ugly. So we are putting together a very persuasive motion to Judge Wilson. And should he grant it, this would be all over. This would be all over.
From your mouth to God's ears. That's what I'm going to say.
Amen. Yeah. And Nick, Alex, Vivian, everybody involved has been very supportive. I know we have a lot of support. We have outpouring support. I've never seen
Alex, you missed so much.
I have never seen a former sheriff come out to attend one of his former deputies' jury trial. That is unheard of. For Alex and Vivian and Nick and everybody else to support Trevor, that is honestly unheard of. The amount of support that we've been getting from that amount of positive outlooks. Now, there are some people like the folks from ALS who said I could have done better. And that's just, to me, it's like the Teddy Roosevelt quote, "Men in arena." And it's very, this is why Luna gets to do what he's doing. Because to conquer is to divide, right? To divide is to conquer.
Oh,
and Luna is hoping that the deputy personnel are divided. And they are divided. They're divided because certain people in certain positions of power in these unions, they improvise. They love this division because for whatever reason they want to also control these deputy personnel. And I say we can't divide. We have to reunite. Trevor's case is an opportunity for the whole department to reunite. It is not for ALAS to bash on the lawyers for what? They could have done better. Really? Did you go to the trial and look at the trial? Like, the former sheriff and Nick and everybody else that were there? Did you give any support? Then shut the fuck up,
And that's the thing. It's what Tommy is saying. You can't, this is a time to come together. Every deputy right now should be coming together. They should really be reconsidering going to Baker to Vegas. They should be reconsidering doing the myriad of things that they should be sending a very clear message right now to the department. But that coming together, in my opinion, cannot happen until, number one, Luna's out, but number two, the ALADS leadership is out. Because I don't care if he was not an ALADS member, that's a member of the department. They're all brothers and sisters. You tell me one good reason why ALADS, or at least one representative from ALADS, couldn't show support in being there in the courtroom and at least sending out thoughts and prayers. I mean, it is in opposition of what this profession stands for. So they are, and that thing that they put out about basically we could have done better, we could have won the case, or blah, 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 blah. that just goes to show not just their pettiness, but their need, their want, their desire to bring members from other unions back to ALADS. Why? To line their own damn pockets. If they cared so much, they would have been in the courtroom.
Yep. Amen to that. And you know what? Proof is in the pudding. If you cared about the future of the department, you would have been there. You would have voiced opposition publicly.
Yeah.
For the 4 years I spent in office, I don't recall the ALADS board or POPA doing absolutely anything, even though I was carrying their water, be it with the vaccine mandate, all the different the defunding efforts, all the different outrageous things that the Board of Supervisors were pulling. They were all quiet, sitting on their hands. Whereas LAPD's protectively, they went out of their way, slamming first Garcetti and then Bass. They definitely voiced an opinion. It was heard. Whereas our unions, for some reason, they keep thinking that, and you always hear this excuse, oh, we're in contract negotiations. They've been in contract negotiations for the last 50 years. And it's never going to get any better because they're going to get whatever the board decides to give them, just like every other county employee. In fact, they even telegraph it. And it's always comes out to be true because they're not united. They're not supporting their own members. They're not being an active presence in the political sphere where they can influence the outcome of elections. They just roll over and do whatever the board wants them to do. And that speaks very poorly of representing deputies, supervisors in employee relations matters.
I just want to say this in case I forget. If there's going to be a deputy that hears this interview, I just want to reiterate one thing. You cannot forget about Trevor Kirk because this was an injustice. You can't forget about Trevor Kirk because you could be next. And nothing you do in your job day to day for members of the public, which are complete strangers, will ever matter more than getting behind Deputy Trevor Kirk. That is my opinion. Nothing is more important than the stand that you decide to take or not take in this very moment.
I'll add one thing to that, Nick. We're examining, and this is a preview of what's coming next. We're examining a very in-depth, long document that involves a proposed settlement between the Attorney General's office and the county, where basically Luna is going to roll over and we're going to adopt the ACLU policing style, which is going to be the end of the department as we know it. It is that bad. We're picking it apart right now, and we'll have more to say later on. But it is so bad that it's going to approach the injustice that Trevor has been dealt with last week.
I do believe that's going to end up being a series, a multi-part series, because that's a 100-page document. Nick,
it is so bad that what you said is not an exaggeration. It literally will be the end of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department if this ever came to fruition. And that's why we need people like Sheriff Villanueva, who continues to stand in the fray, and people like Tommy Yu, who continues to defend deputies worth defending. Trevor Kirk was worth defending. And if I were ever in that same circumstance, I'd want Tommy defending me. And so, and I say that because it's like, I can't imagine what it was like for you, but you did great. And we need to have justice for Trevor Kirk.